Why this story matters. Amid constant bad news, it's important to highlight examples of progress that rarely make the front page. Quick summary: this story highlights recent developments related to slow, showing how constructive action can lead to meaningful results. When Jessica Fujii was in kindergarten, she drew a picture of her future. In a "What do you want to be when you grow up?" booklet, she skipped ballerina and veterinarian, and wrote down something else entirely: sea otter biologist, complete with cartoon-like otters in the great tide pool at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Fujii grew up in California's Bay Area, and trips to Monterey and its aquarium became a regular part of her childhood. She remembers paddling alongside her dad in a kayak on Monterey Bay, watching wild otters float on their backs as they cracked open crabs and let the shells sink. Back then, she mostly took their presence for granted. Today, as a sea otter researcher and program manager at the aquarium, she knows how close California came to losing them and how much now depends on the fragile population that remains. Would you like to read more good news about slow otters, munching sea scientists, and change? Along northern California's coast, sea otters help habitats endure climate impacts like warming oceans, shifting predator ranges, and harmful algal blooms by keeping underwater plant life healthy and supporting resilient ecosystems. Fujii is still focused on individual sea otters, but she's also tracking a bigger picture of these important creatures over time. From Fujii's vantage point on Monterey Bay, southern sea otters, the subspecies that lives along the central California coast, are both a conservation success story and a reminder of what's been lost. Once hunted to near extinction for their fur, they survived off the coast of California thanks to a tiny remnant population and later federal protections and hands-on conservation work. These days, there are only about 3,000 southern sea otters in California, and the geographical range has shrunk to roughly 13 of the coastline they historically occupied. The numbers have been relatively steady for years, but the range hasn't meaningfully expanded in about 2 decades. Globally, sea otters live in coastal waters from Alaska across the North Pacific to Russia, but the southern sea otter is the only population found in California, and it's the one scientists have studied most closely for its role in kelp forests, seagrass meadows, and coastal wetlands. And over the past several decades, scientists have learned that these animals punch far above their weight, especially along the nearshore strip, where land and ocean meet. From cuddly to keystone predator, it's easy to see why sea otters are often treated like stuffed animals brought to life. Fujii describes a tiny, 5-pound pup as basically a fur ball. It's kind of like holding a kitten before their teeth and jaws develop. Image courtesy of Monterey Bay Aquarium. But the illusion only lasts so long. One longtime aquarium volunteer said he wouldn't want to be stuck in a pool with an adult otter. It's a good reminder that beneath the fluff is a muscular predator built to crush crabs and urchins. Ecologists describe sea otters as a classic keystone species, an animal whose presence has much bigger impacts on its surroundings than its numbers alone would suggest. Unlike many other marine mammals, sea otters don't have a thick layer of blubber to keep them warm. Instead, they rely on extremely dense fur and a very high metabolic rate. It's about 2 times higher than similarly sized terrestrial mammals, Fujii said, and because they can't store energy as blubber, they need to be consuming those calories every single day. That constant need to eat up to a quarter of their body weight daily helps explain why their foraging makes them major players in nearshore ecosystems. What and how much they eat ripples outward through food webs, shaping whether the coast is dominated by thick underwater forests and meadows, or by stripped-down degraded sea floors that are more vulnerable to climate pressures. Keeping kelp forests alive in a warming ocean in recent years, a prolonged bout of unusually warm ocean conditions made more likely and more intense by climate change has caused kelp forests to crash along much of California, leaving behind vast urchin barrens where little grows besides hungry purple urchins. Around Monterey Bay, though, researchers found that sea otters ramped up their urchin eating in the remaining kelp beds, allowing those lost patches of forest to hang on. Left unchecked, urchins can mow down kelp beds and turn lush underwater forests into places where urchins have grazed away almost all the kelp. When otters are present and hunting, they thin out those urchins, giving kelp a chance to grow taller and thicker and to shelter a wide range of fish, invertebrates, and other marine life. Across much of their range, when sea otters consume urchins, they keep their population under control and limit how much grazing the urchins are doing on the kelp, Fujii said. That allows the kelp to flourish and be more abundant and provide homes for many other species. A recent study stitched together more than a century of kelp data along the California coast using old maps and satellite images. The analysis found steep losses in the floating kelp canopy in southern and northern regions, where otters remain absent, but notable long-term growth in kelp along the central coast, exactly where sea otter populations have rebounded. Healthy kelp forests, in turn, absorb wave energy and soften the punch of storms that are projected to grow more intense with climate change, reducing erosion along vulnerable shorelines. Scientists are still debating how much long-term carbon storage kelp forests actually provide, said Fujii, since much of that kelp washes ashore and decomposes. But when otters keep kelp alive, they also maintain rich, complex coastal ecosystems that are better able to absorb climate shocks than bare sea floors.